Right. All right. Good morning. Yes. Yesterday I talked about us continuing on our ad backlog item. Though I got one comment from, I always remember his name because I had a session with him on state machines and stuff. Johnny, I was talking about, because we were working on some styling yesterday, and I added these colors, and I mentioned when you do these tokens, try to avoid having explicit, especially when you have contrast, or is it called contrast? You know, when you do dark mode and light mode and stuff, you don't really want to call them white and black, because when you go into dark mode, these are kind of flipped. So their values are flipped, but they are still called like white and black. So you would rather want to call them other things. And yeah, I totally agree with that. And it would be kind of cool to have like theming on this app, actually, especially light and dark mode. So yeah, we should definitely look more into the colors. He also talked about his experience with using units. And yeah, previously I used like pixels and stuff. And I didn't actually got into rems until it's not that long ago, because you kind of go from pixels to ems or ems, and then you go to rems. And if I remember correctly, pixels are of course explicit pixels on the screen. Ems are relative to the parent node font size, I believe. And rem is relative to the body, or like the document font size. So if you're using rems, you can just change the font size on the document, and then everything will be relative to that, which makes it so powerful. Another thing that makes it powerful is that you rarely want to work with single pixels. You typically want to work with, like, one rem represents, is it 6 pixels? And you want those kinds of constraints in your design, so you don't have like 3 pixels on one side and 4 pixels on the other side. You would have like 3 pixels on one side, which is half a rem, and then 6 pixels on the other side, which will be like 1 rem, for example. Even though they differ, they're relatively, they will look better. Yes. So, but again, this is like a whole science major in itself. So I'll just leave it at that for now, and point out if I'm saying something wrong here, or you have some other experiences with related to this stuff. Yes, I started thinking yesterday, I want to try one thing first before we go into more UI, because we have been playing around with our new matches API, and I want to, like, one of the powers of having like this state machine API compared to like a state chart is that you can define these state machines into your state tree. And I wonder if one specific thing works, and that is basically when we now say state matches blah blah blah, everything's typed here. But I wonder if I would do, for example, this and state matches, and then we're state, let's just call it silly matches, and then we're going to match on a nested state machine, and then we'll see how this stuff behaves in terms of typing. So for example, if silly is not defined within any of these states, how would that look like, and how would it look like if it was actually defined within one of these or in all of these states? Would it then also work down here? Would it understand when I point to state silly that it types related to these matches? And if that works, I want to try to refactor a little bit so that we try to play with multiple state machines. And we do this because this is new to me. Like, I've been diving into these state machines and state charts for a long time, but I haven't had a chance to properly use them. And I have this big question in my head around the flexibility of this state machine API versus having like a state chart. So I just want to explore it, and I'm super happy that you want to join me on that journey. So let's go ahead and implement our silly state machine. And maybe we can just implement it like super quickly here. Authenticated state. Yes. Okay, so we'll just type silly machine or silly state. Oh, sorry, I've been testing something with as I mentioned last time, like it's really interesting. Like Code Sandbox has this debounced thing. So as you see, when I don't type for like half a second or something, the preview will just re-render. And we're having a full review of this now inside Code Sandbox. Because what we're used to when you work locally is that when you actually save, that is when like your preview triggers. And that's actually not possible inside Code Sandbox now. And we've talked about this internally, and it has just become a thing we haven't noticed internally, that this might not be the best experience. So we are like diving into a new experience related to how do you do hot reloading, do you do it on save, and stuff like that. And these different modes of working on styling versus working on logic versus working on side effects. Because with side effects, you typically want to refresh the whole thing. So you are sure that you don't, like you're starting from scratch. So you have kind of, okay, I'm diverging crazy here, but there is some stuff happening here, which I'm super excited about. Anyways, silly state. If the state is foo, we want to have like a foo bar, or if the state is bar, we want it to be foo string or bar string. Okay, so now we have typed our silly state, and then we want to introduce our silly state machine, and we do that by using a type called state machine, and then I believe we should be able to let's see. Yeah, so the question now is, should we create this state machine? Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, this was kind of weird because we really want this to be the silly state, like the state machine should probably be part of your state tree all the time. It would be a little bit weird to kind of add it dynamically. I don't know, let's try it just because we can. So we can try that. So when we go to home, we are actually going to add the state machine there. Or is that silly? Yeah, that's a big question. Like with a state chart, it's like, of course, everything's there when you define the state chart. But here we are in like a very dynamic context, so we can kind of choose when the state machine should be available or not. For me, like intuitively, I would feel like these state machines are like part of the state tree. It's not something you would add and remove. But maybe, okay, let's just try it. See how it feels. Yeah, and we don't really need to implement it. We can just have it because now it's actually part of our state, and that's what we're going to figure out. So we have our let's see if everything still works. Yes, and then we're going to do and state silly. Yeah, so now it understood that we actually have the silly state because we're in one of these states. So that's good. And then we're going to check if this matches foo. And now when I point to state silly, it has both of them. Yeah, so that didn't work, I think. Yeah, if it's foo, it should only be foo. If it's bar, it should only be bar. But I have this feeling, if I do, let's see, can I do this inline? No. Test equals, no, this doesn't work. Yeah, because if I would do this, and then I would say if state.silly matches foo, would it then work? No, it still says foobar, and I think this is related to us diving into a nested property, and this is kind of annoying with TypeScript, is that if I do state silly, and then I point directly to silly, no, it still says foobar. That's weird. I thought that would work. Now I think it's something else here. Okay, I'm not going to spend all that much time on this, but we're going to spend a little bit more time on this because I'm really curious about it. Because we have state foo, state bar. Oh wait, sorry. This will be the same, yeah, because the different states becomes the transitions, and these were named the same thing, so it was probably not the actual state, it was the transition. I have been thinking about, as you can see, when we move into the different states, we actually call them. And that might be a little bit confusing. So we could have an API that said, let's see, transition, and you would say home. And then you would, because that wouldn't, then we wouldn't be confused like we did now. So I think that just basically resolves that. Like, I got confused now because the name of the state was the same name I was using for an actual state value. But if we had this transition thing, that wouldn't be a confusion. Cool. So maybe, okay, note to self. Okay, so we have foobar. Let's try the other one again then. And state silly matches foo. State silly. Yeah, awesome. Now it says foo. So it actually understands this. So that means that you can actually, yeah, I think this is pretty powerful. So you can have like nested state machines, and then you can go like from the top and you can say, okay, if we're in this state, okay, now we have a new state machine available. And if that state machine is in this state, so you have this check here where you kind of dive into the specific state, and then your state values will be typed related to that. And that is super, super powerful. Yes. And I think it also shows them, like, where state charts are really nice is that when they're not too big, they are very explicit and very easy to understand. But if you want to do something that's more complex, you start kind of like pushing the walls a little bit, and then things get either messy or you're just not able to express it. While here, things are very decoupled, but you are also very flexible. So what I was thinking here is that we could have, we could bring back our auth namespace. So we would say like auth here. And maybe we should just do that for now. Like, for me, it's much more fun playing around with state than UI. You should see me at Code Sandbox whenever someone asks me to implement some UI stuff. I kind of, yeah, I don't have the same enthusiasm. It's just because I don't know. Yeah, it's just very different. I'm not saying, it's not because I don't think it's challenging, because I think UI is insanely challenging. In many ways, it's more challenging than managing state. But yeah, it's just different. Okay, so I just want to finish exploring this. So what we're going to do is, let's talk about it first. Okay, so we are able now to do this very explicit matching, which is kind of cool. So it would be nice to see if we can split up our, let's remove our silly state. So now we have like authenticated, everything is on one root state. So what if we brought back our auth namespace, and then we would have authenticating, unauthenticated, and authenticated. And then we would, when we are authenticated, we would transition into home, which is really interesting. And then when the authenticated flow exits, we could transition into like the different pages would have an additional state called something like initializing or something. So it will move back into initializing. Yeah, I think we just have to try it again. I haven't architected an app like this before, so we just have to try it together. And I think often when I'm not sure how to do something, I just try to do something, and then I get a better idea of how I actually want to solve it. So we are, at least we're going to start by introducing our auth namespace again. And let's do an index here as well. And I believe we had some actions as well. State, and that was a state machine. I'll see if I can try to do some quick copy pasting here. Let's see. So we want our authenticating and authenticated, and then we want our backlog to rather be part of the other stuff, while the user and the profile should be part of this state. Let's see how that works. So we can do this, and backlog items is not part of this neither. Then we say authenticated, bloop, blippity bloop, oops, like that. And we don't need these ones. And then we have our state machine, and this is going to be, so when we're authenticating, you might be authenticated. When you are authenticated, you can be unauthenticated, and then unauthenticated, you can move into authenticating. Is it complaint? Oh, should that be there? There we go. Okay, I think this, so when you're authenticating, oh, you can be unauthenticated or authenticated. If you are authenticated, you can be unauthenticated, and if you are unauthenticated, you can be authenticating. Okay, cool. So that's that thing, and then what we're going to do here is let's call it initialize state instead. And we are not going to have, we're going to have like initializing. And this is where kind of, does this make sense? Because here we are saying initializing, but we're really authenticating. So it's, well, are we? Not necessarily. Like we might, it might be a flow initializing. So you're kind of like authenticating first, you're grabbing some data, and the app is not really ready to run yet, or to display its homepage. So maybe this does make sense. We'll see. So we have, let's see, let's introduce initializing first. So when we are initializing, we can actually move, in theory, we can move to any of these states. Edit current week, plan next week. Is that all of them? I think so. Yeah. And then when we are in either of these states, we can actually move back to initializing. But when we are adding a backlog item, we can only move back to home or initializing. And we start in the initializing state. Okay. Let's see. Cool. Let's just continue and we can go through it when we're done. So we have our on-auth changed here, and we should move this to our auth actions. Import async action and action from Overmind. And we had import user from Firebase. Yeah, and now we're just getting some errors here. So let's see. If we have a user, yeah, let's import as actions from actions, import state from state, export state actions, and then import as auth from auth. And now we have to put back our thingy, namespace auth, import merge namespace from Overmind config. Cool. Yes, now we have our typing here. So what we're going to do is to say home authentic, home auth authenticated, like that. And then we're going to start our stream. Let's see, we can start by moving into home. And when we do that, let's see, did I call it current? Let's call it auth. And root. And then we fire up the thingy. And now we can actually, whenever we move out of this authenticating, we can dispose our backlog stream again. And what's interesting about this is that we're also grabbing like the user and the profile, and maybe we had some data there. Maybe we have like functionality related to my start screen, or it should remember the last screen you were on. So we could move into the different screens here based on data from the profile, for example. But okay, yes. So now if we move out of authenticated, we let's see, we dispose our backlog stream thingy. Yeah, I wonder, okay, but I guess now this doesn't work. So if I do like auth dot, yeah, because now we don't have the backlog there. God damn it. Because this is what I really want to express. If we are authenticated, do this stuff. If for some reason you get unauthenticated, I want to reset some state. And I can't really express that in a good way. Like I can remove the subscription, but I can't really reset reset this. Do we even have backlog there now? Just to be sure. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so I can't really do that. Okay, so that's, so we have some good things here, but we also have something we weren't able to do. Unauthenticated. Yeah, and then of course, whenever we move out of this, we want to say state.initializing. Oh, wait. And this is nice, because we can do this. Because we wanted to move back. Oh, yeah. But we still don't have the backlog when we're initializing. Yeah, anyways. Root. Let's call it root. We can look at that later. Okay, so the point here is that what we're trying to express is that we're trying to express that when we grab a user, when Firebase for some reason does an on-auth changed, and we have a user, we go and grab the profile for that user. We move into the authenticated state where we actually set the user and the profile. And when we have that, we move into the home state where we reset the backlog, and then we fire up a subscription to update that backlog. And then whenever we exit from authenticated state, it will move the root state into initializing, and we are disposing our subscription. Cool. That is cool. So what we can do here, maybe we can just do that right away. So we could just say, okay, let's have the backlog here as well. Oops. Is it angry because as an any type? Why does it say that? Why did it suddenly start yelling at me? Because I added this thing? Are you kidding me? What? That didn't make any sense. So when I added that, suddenly this thing started breaking. Parameter auth implicitly has an any type. It's as if it doesn't match any. That's insanely weird. Backlog. Oh, wait. Okay. There it is. Wow. That's kind of crazy. It just completely broke here. It was a bit difficult to see. Like it actually broke here, and that caused like the typing of the root state was broken, and then when we tried to use it, it was broken there as well. Actually made sense, but yeah. Cool. Yeah, okay, so this is interesting. We are going to authenticated state. We set the user on the profile. We move to the home state where we, well, I guess we don't have to set the backlog there because it will be empty. And then we set up the subscription when we successfully move to the home page. And then whenever we go out of authenticated, we move to the initializing state, we reset the backlog, and we dispose the streaming of the backlog. Cool. And then when we sign in, we move to the authenticating state and we call sign in, blah, blah, blah. Don't need this one. Let's save this. Okay, cool. And then we have some actions here. State of sorry. So now we need to, as part of the, so this can't be, what should we call this? Base state. We haven't typed in our, let's call it base state. And then I guess, where were we? So now we're checking if the top state machine is there, and so this is also interesting because now we split it up into like a namespace, and this is also a thing for state charts. If we start splitting state charts into different namespaces, they become like a parallel thing. They live completely beside each other. But if you start nesting state, then they become like part of their own thing, like nested state charts and nested state. And so what we did here with auth is that we moved it to its own namespace, which means that it's not part of the typing of our root state, which means that when I point to add backlog item, it doesn't know anything about the auth state. So we could, as an alternative, we could have actually included the state machine in our base state here instead. And then it would implicitly be, it would implicitly know that when we are on add backlog item, we would be authenticated with a profile. But this is interesting. Because now we're not able to, well, I guess we do not really care about this. What we care about is, let's let this one slide for now. So if we are authenticated, that's when we are allowed to add a backlog item, which is true. But we should also actually be in the, not really, because we should, like if we are in the add backlog item screen, that's when we should be allowed to add an item. Though we also need to be authenticated to be allowed to add that item. So the question is, are you implicitly authenticated if you are on the add backlog item screen? And technically, no. Like for some reason, the UI might allow you to be on that screen. Like there's something wrong in the UI implementation, and then you would be able to like trigger this action without being on that screen, and without being like being on that screen without being authenticated. So it is actually correct that we need to, state auth matches. And this is the thing, like now we're doing so much stuff, and I'm going to say it again, it seems like we're completely overcomplicating stuff, and in some sense we are doing that. But the point is that when we write logic, we are not guarding that logic. We are using the UI to determine what logic we should be able to trigger. But what state machines introduces as a concept is that we're guarding our logic. The logic itself determines if it should run or not. It's not the UI implementation that determines if something should be able to run or not, which is the really good part of the concept. The challenge, though, is to express that in a good way. And a way to express that is to use, for example, state charts. And then you have a simple state machine. And here in Overmind, we're exploring how you can integrate these state machines into your state to effectively guard your logic. Yes, and that's what we're exploring. Can we find a good way to express it that kind of intuitively puts you into the correct mindset? And it's insanely tricky, but that's the fun part of it. It's like doing something tricky and see if we can make it simpler. Anyways, cannot find module. Oh, yeah, this is interesting. I think something is broken there. Yeah, this used to work. This is interesting. Oh, no, it did work. There's something else there. What did I do? What did I do now? Let's see if we can see that error here. Wow, did I break something? Unquote in promise. Auth argument. Next or observer must be a valid object or on auth state change. Oh, sorry. Why didn't I? Yeah, it would be nice to have an error there, because this is now on auth changed. Okay, so we are initializing of undefined. Let's see. Where did it break? This is not here, it's here. Cannot read property of undefined. That is interesting. Oh, yeah. So the thing, yeah, this is very interesting. Basically, what's happening here is that when you run, so this is not completely compatible. When we run actions in Overmind, those actions has an it tracks the execution of it. So basically, what happens here is that we call on auth changed, and it's in execution mode. And then this action will return a promise because it's async, and then Overmind waits for that promise to resolve. And when it resolves, it detects that action as being not executed anymore. And this is how the DevTools work. It's able to track everything. But so the point is that when this is done running, we are grabbing the profile and everything. This action is done with its execution. But then suddenly when we go out of the authenticated state, we are suddenly trying to mutate again. And we are actually not allowed to do that because we are actually done running this action, which is interesting, which is very interesting. Yeah, so we would actually have to, yeah, this is very interesting. So maybe this isn't very compatible at all. This is, by the way, just a convention returning the transitions. Yeah. I find it weird that it's undefined though. Yeah, okay, I guess this is something I have to think about, because with the exit hook of a transition, we are making the actions long-lived. Like they live beyond their execution, which is really not something. And by the way to fix it is basically just you have to trigger an action here. So you say like actions and then reset or something. So you trigger like an action and then that is responsible for putting you back into whatever logic you want to run there. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, this needs some more thought. But anyways, so we just to conclude, I have to get to work. So what we explored here is like, okay, these state machines, kind of interesting. We created this matches API, which made it very easy to guard logic and get the typing for free, which is super awesome. We also found out that in this session that, okay, even if we have nested state machines, we are able to combine checking their states to get the correct typing in the guard, not in the guard, but we're guarding the logic and we get the typing for free across state machines, which is super awesome. But then we're hitting this exit hook of transitions, where we basically, we should run actions here. So that might be like it's kind of the same as handling an event. So if you were to, in an action, well, this is a good example. So on initialize, we are not like, we could do, you might think that, oh, you can just do this. And then we can say state object, was this the, yeah, this was the stream thingy. So let's just add to the backlog here. And then we get like, no, sorry, this was the auth change. Anyways, handle auth change, point to state. You might think that, yeah, we can just do it here. But here we have the same thing, like the execution of the function is done. So continuing to work on in this context is not ideal. And the reason is really the dev tools. Maybe this gives like a mental overhead that seems weird because it's not in line with like what you can do in JavaScript. But in terms of the dev tools, it will be extremely confusing that the same action execution would like update over time. So basically, if I have the dev tools here, so you would have, for example, errors cleared and it executed down here. But then like 5 minutes later, suddenly something new happens in it. So where do you actually show that? Would that be like a new it wouldn't be a new execution of the action, but it would be an update of the action. So how would you like show that in the dev tools? So maybe that's something that should be rather solved in the dev tools instead of adding those limitations in the code. Yeah. This is certainly food for thought. Yeah. Okay, I won't get any further with this now. So thanks for following along on this. This is like, now we're deep inside my brain and I hope I'm able to express what I'm thinking. And that it's interesting to like, one thing is building the app, which is fun, but it's diving into like, how are we actually building things in general that I find fascinating. So yeah, thanks for following me along. And tomorrow I'll guess, I can't stop thinking about this. So I will give you a rundown tomorrow morning on what I ended up with here. And until then, have a great day and talk to you later.